Welcome back to Courtroom Conversations on the classic Courtroom YouTube channel. I'm Dylan Brooks Hamilton, and I'm excited to dive into a case that's sparking debate across the country with Susan Kelly Ashford.
It's great to be here, Dylan.
We're taking a deep dive into the Supreme Court case surrounding Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. You've probably seen the headlines, as over 26 states are grappling with similar laws, many already facing lawsuits. But today we're going beyond the surface to understand what's really at stake, both medically and legally.
What's fascinating here is that this case boils down to a fundamental question: what constitutes harm when it comes to young people? Both sides passionately believe they're protecting minors, which is where things get interesting. To even begin unpacking that, we need to clarify what gender-affirming care actually is. Some people might picture a dramatic medical intervention, but is that accurate? Not at all. Gender-affirming care is actually a multidisciplinary approach. Think pediatricians, mental health specialists, and a whole team working together to understand a young person's needs. It starts with addressing any distress the individual might be feeling, often related to something called gender dysphoria. Now, it's important to define this accurately because there are a lot of misconceptions out there.
Right. And I think people hear gender dysphoria and jump to conclusions about medical treatments. But as you said, it's more about understanding the individual's experience first.
Absolutely. Gender dysphoria refers to the distress someone might experience when their gender identity doesn't align with the sex they were assigned at birth. Addressing this distress can involve a range of approaches, and for many, the first step is a social transition.
So we're talking about things like adopting a new name, hairstyle, clothing, or pronouns. I think a lot of us, regardless of gender identity, can relate to wanting to express ourselves authentically. We've all experimented with our style or presentation as we figure out who we are.
Exactly, Dylan. It's about creating space for that self-expression. For some, social transition is enough. For others, the next step might be puberty blockers. And I know this is where a lot of the controversy arises.
Yes, puberty blockers often become the center of the debate. These medications, known as GnRH agonists, have been used safely for decades to treat precocious puberty. That's when puberty begins at an unusually early age. In the context of gender-affirming care, they temporarily pause puberty, giving young people more time to explore their gender identity without the pressure of physical changes.
So it's essentially hitting the pause button on puberty. This isn't a radical new treatment then, and the effects are reversible.
That's right. Many of the effects are reversible once the medication is stopped. There's been some discussion about potential impacts on bone development, but research hasn't shown an increased risk of fractures. Of course, ongoing research is important, but the available evidence doesn't support some of the concerns that are often raised.
And how long can someone be on puberty blockers? Is this something that can go on for years, or is there a set limit?
It can last several years, giving young people ample time to make informed decisions about their future care. For some, that next step might involve hormone therapy. But it's crucial to clarify that this comes after puberty blockers, and only for adolescents mature enough to give informed consent. We're talking about either estrogen or testosterone hormones naturally produced in the body to help align their physical characteristics with their gender identity.
This is often where I think people have the most questions and maybe even anxieties. Hormone therapy sounds like a big step. Can you talk about the potential benefits and risks?
You're right. It's important to be honest about both sides of that coin. Hormone therapy can be incredibly beneficial, helping someone feel more comfortable in their own skin, but it's often a lifelong treatment. As with any medical treatment, there are potential risks. Estrogen therapy carries a slight risk of blood clots, and testosterone therapy can affect cholesterol levels. That's why it's so important to work closely with healthcare providers to monitor health and manage any side effects.
Now we've covered social transition, puberty blockers, and hormone therapy. This brings us to what often dominates the headlines: surgery. Many people assume surgery is a common part of gender-affirming care for teens, but is that really the case?
That's a huge misconception that needs to be addressed. Surgery is not common for transgender teens. In fact, it's far more common for cisgender males who experience gynecomastia, excess breast tissue. When it's performed for trans teens, it's almost always breast reduction surgery for older transgender males, and even then it's incredibly rare.
Do we have data to back that up? Because I think that goes against what many people believe.
Absolutely. A 2019 study analyzed millions of insurance claims and found that out of 151 breast reductions on minors, nearly all 97% were not related to being transgender. That really highlights the gap between public perception and reality.
That's a striking statistic. So we've laid out these different stages of care. Now, how does this all connect to the well-being of transgender youth? That seems to be a central part of the debate.
You're right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, one of the key arguments in favor of gender-affirming care is that it can significantly improve the mental health and well-being of trans youth. Research shows they face higher rates of stress, depression, and suicidal thoughts compared to their cisgender peers.
But haven't there also been studies showing mixed results when it comes to the effectiveness of these treatments?
Yes, and it's important to acknowledge those studies. For example, one published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that while hormone therapy helped some trans youth with depression and anxiety, the results were more complex for others. There's nuance here, and we need more long-term research to fully understand the impacts of different approaches.
That particular study also made headlines because of 2 suicides that occurred among the participants. How do we responsibly discuss these tragic events without sensationalizing them?
It's crucial to avoid drawing conclusions based on limited data. Suicide is complex with multiple contributing factors. We can't oversimplify this sensitive topic, and we need to remember that these are real people with complex lives, not just data points. Ultimately, we need more robust research conducted with sensitivity and respect for the individuals involved.
So we've established that the research is ongoing and there's a lot we're still learning. Now let's shift gears to the legal arguments at the heart of this Supreme Court case. You mentioned earlier that both sides claim they're trying to protect minors from harm. How does that play out legally?
The crux of the battle revolves around the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Think of it as a legal shield ensuring everyone is treated fairly under the law. Those challenging the Tennessee ban argue it discriminates against trans youth by denying them access to care available to their cisgender peers, violating their right to equal protection.
So their argument is that the state is singling out trans youth and denying them health care opportunities enjoyed by others.
Exactly. And they point to the support for gender-affirming care from major medical organizations like the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics. This isn't some fringe treatment. It's established and evidence-based, they argue.
What about those supporting the ban? What are their justifications for restricting access to this care?
They argue they're protecting minors from potential harm. They point to the long-term effects of hormone therapy, the irreversibility of some of those effects, and the potential for regret. They also sometimes question the scientific consensus surrounding gender identity and the effectiveness of gender-affirming care.
It seems like we have a clash of interpretations of harm here. One side emphasizes the harm of denying care. The other highlights the potential harm from the care itself. The Supreme Court now has to weigh these arguments and determine which holds more legal weight.
Precisely.